video start
video on
video on. Camera on.
Ranjit, so we can start now.
Yeah.
Ranjit,
We're just waiting for Rajeev. Yeah.
Okay.
Ganesh, welcome.
Thank you.
Baltamski, please switch your video on so that everybody can see you. Hi, Rajeev.
Ranjit.
So let's start. Yeah.
Hello, welcome and namaste to all of you. Today, this evening, we are having a webinar on Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. This is jointly organized by the Swadeshi Jagaran Manch Kerala unit and Center for Policy and Development Studies. I welcome the eminent speakers and all the guests who are watching this program live. Let me talk first about introduce about Center for Policy and Development Studies. Center for Policy and Development Studies is a think tank formed by, can be said as an attempt of a think tank formed by former ABVP workers. It's spread across several areas across the country. And we are focusing mainly on social, economic, and development studies. And we have a special emphasis on national security, both external and internal. And we have done programs on China, the recent Taiwan imbroglio, and such stuff. And we are also deeply into studying the economics and environment impacts on the society post-COVID and before COVID. So first, I welcome the Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, three-term member of Parliament. He is a technological entrepreneur. He likes to be defined like that. Rajeev was vocal in the Parliament in his first term. He was the one who was instrumental in bringing out the 2G spectrum scam. He raised the voice in Parliament on the subject. And Rajeev is focuses on reforms in economy and governance, technology, internet issues related to youth, and issues concerning national security, like CPDS itself. And he's into sustainable city governance of Bangalore. Rajeev was he's a Silicon Valley engineer. He was microprocessor design engineer. And everybody knows that BPL, Vodafone, and all those things. Rajeev made a revolution in the cellular technology of the country. Welcome, Rajeev Chandrasekhar MP.
Thank you.
Program. Namaste. And we have Mr. Paul Thomas, who brought a revolution in small banking in Kerala. He is the CEO of ESAF Small Finance Bank and the founder of ESAF Group of Social Enterprises. ESAF Small Finance Bank started operations in 2017. At present, ESAF has operations. It is a pan-India presence with 454 banking outlets spread across the country, all the 17 states. and is providing access to more than 35 lakh households from the bottom of the pyramid segment. Mr. Paul is a supporter of sustainable development, climate change, and democratic governance. He has won accolades and recognition at local, regional, and international levels, and is a speaker on these subjects across the globe. We welcome Mr. Paul Thomas for the program. We accept Mr. Thomas to share his views on the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan and maybe some critical points on that subject also. We have Mr. Ganesh Kumar, who is the Managing Director of Ayoki Fabricon Private Limited. He is a product of Symbiosis Institute of Management, Pune, and is a big entrepreneur with his footprint spread across the globe. I can say that in offices in UAE, Oman, 27 African countries, he is running projects and construction of industrial projects on cement plants, sugar plants, and thermal power plants. And is a postgraduate in business administration from Symbiosis Institute of Pune, one of the prestigious institutes of management studies in the country. And he has been to the industry for the past 38 years. That's a big thing. And interestingly, he is a widely traveled man, and he has entered into Limca Book of Records for a unique distinction of 234 flights traveled in the 234 flights in a one single calendar year of 2019. Welcome, Mr. Ganesh Kumar, for our program.
Thank you.
We expect your active contribution and participation in this program.
Good evening. Thank you.
And we have our own Sundaram Ramamirtham, who has been an RSS Pracharak, is now the national convener of the Swadeshi Jagaran Manch. Sundaramji has, I can say, is an eminent chartered accountant of Madurai, and has been into the national issues. He has been a Sangha Pracharak, and he has worked closely with our Prime Minister in this Sangha work. I welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
For our program. I have our own Swadeshi Jagaran Manch Kerala State Convener, Mr. Ranjit Karthikeyan, again a chartered accountant of repute. Ranjit has turned around Swadeshi into a very active post in the state. Now we have our friends here, Santosh, who is an executive engineer with Kerala State Electricity Board. We have Suhas. Suhas is with Bima Jewelers. And we have Rajesh Pillai, journalist and editor of Tatumai. And we have a lot of our friends over here. We have Kiran, we have Prasad, we have Mithun, a lot of friends. I welcome all of you to an interesting session. I think Ranjit will now take over from me and will do a moderation and then for the program. Ranjit, your turn, please.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you for introducing all the eminent guests and friends who are here. And let us not waste too much of time. And we will possibly go ahead with the keynote address by Rajeev Chandrasekhar. Happy birthday to you, Rajeev.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't know that. Happy birthday, Rajeev.
Sir, all of us wish you, sir, very best.
Oh, thank you very much.
Sir, let us start with the Atmanirbhar Bharat. The government has rolled out a 20 trillion package. We would not possibly call it a stimulus package, but it is a kind of a package which has a very long term or even medium term. But there is a criticism that there has not been enough fiscal stimulus for the market. As a lawmaker, how would you possibly look at this and explain the impact of this 20 trillion package that has been rolled out by the finance minister, and how the economy, which is being stated to go down further by almost all the rating agencies, and people have been doomsayers, and not much of media has been support of the package. There has been strong criticism about not pumping in the requisite amount of money, even though we said about 10% of the GDP will be pumped in. We hardly have about a 1% with varying numbers. So how do you look at it, and how do you explain the government's initiative, and how do you see the impact of this.
Ranjit, just so that I understand, thank you for the introduction, but just so I understand, do you want me to answer question by question or you want me to speak? Just so that I understand the format.
You can do an introductory speech. I just set the motion rolling.
Okay, fine.
You can do a keynote and then go to the other speakers and then come back on specifics.
Okay. No, so no, thank you, Arun. Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you all for having me this evening, and for your warm wishes. Look, I want to just explain. I will speak a little bit about the overall economy. I'll speak about the coronavirus shock and Atmanirbhar Bharat. In some sense, they're all connected, but at the heart of it is this shock that we are going through, which is the coronavirus shock. We, until January, let's say February of 2020, we were in the midst of the first year of the second term of the Modi government. The discussions in Delhi and discussions in government and policy making was about how to take an economy that was at 2.8 trillion, that was the projection for March 2020, and how to take that $2.8 trillion economy to a $5 trillion economy. The entire focus of government policy making was that we needed to take this economy from 2.8 trillion to 5 trillion. And there were a number of strategic aspects about that growth that was very important. But that showed for us that the growth model for the last 10 to 15 years was not necessarily the model that would take us to a $5 trillion economy. So this awareness was there in the Prime Minister and the senior leadership of this government, and for people like us who work around them, that the model that we were working on had a number of problems, particularly financial sector, number one. Number two, the manufacturing sector of this country, because for a $5 trillion economy or any growth economy, it is very important that the bulk of the consumption demand within the economy is catered to by a robust manufacturing capability within the country. And that was missing. And it was clear even then that if we wanted to double our economy, the manufacturing component of the economy will have to increase by at least 1 trillion in the next 3 to 4 years. And all of the requirements for that, whether it is policy, whether it's the enabling infrastructure requirements, the ecosystem of logistics was just not there. And just not there, not because it was not doable in the last 5 years, but just not there because it was ignored as a policy, as almost ignored as a practice for decades by India and our consequent entry into these free trade agreements, and which have all destroyed MSMEs and manufacturing. So I will leave that part as a preamble. There was some moderate slowdown for the last 2 quarters leading up to January, which is related to our own financial sector issues and some global trade issues. But when the coronavirus shock hit us, I want to be very clear and unambiguous that it has hit us as a deep shock. There is a tendency to compare the coronavirus shock to the 2008 financial crisis. And in very simple terms, I will tell you that the 2008 financial crisis was a small walk in the park compared to this. It is nothing compared to this. The 2008 financial crisis was restricted to the financial sector, and it impacted purely financial liquidity. It originated internationally. It was not originating in India. It had some implications on exports, and it had some implications on capital flows into India. But by and large, the real economy of India was unimpacted by that. And therefore, the solution could be very easily through fiscal stimulus. In this case, and it's very important to understand, because we are talking today as a group of people who are more than just economic observers. We are talking about our view towards nationalism, our view towards India being a strong nation. So there is a common thread that binds us. This corona shock has impacted the 4 pillars on which our economy was chugging for the last 5.5 years. It has impacted consumption because of social distancing and lockdown. It has impacted supply chain. There's a huge supply chain disruptions for both importing and exporting industry. It has impacted capital flows and has impacted the service sector. Hospitality, tourism, airlines have been deeply impacted by the coronavirus shock. So this shock to the economy is a much more wider, deeper structural shock. And it is not a shock that can be turned on or off by a fiscal stimulus and a package announced by the government. This is a shock that will end up costing us not less than, in my estimate, 10% of the GDP. Mike, I have done a detailed calculation, detailed to the extent that you can detail it out at this stage. But this shock today, up to today, has already cost us 20 lakh crores. We don't know what the implications will be in terms of demand moderations for the rest of the financial year. But I can assure you that as we sit today, the economy has gone down by 10% of the previous year's economy. So that is point number one. Now, I will just explain this 20 lakh crore in the context of the government's response. The government today sits as it has sat in March, understanding clearly that the coronavirus shock is a lasting shock. The coronavirus pandemic does not go away tomorrow. It will be with us for at least another 12 months or even further till the vaccine or medicine is found. So we are operating currently economically, socially, culturally, trade-wise. We are operating in an era of uncertainty. Uncertainty is the new normal. And therefore, whatever the government has done, it has done in a manner where it acknowledges and understands that the government's response will not be a one-off response or a two-off response. It will be an ongoing, continuing response. It will have to be an ongoing, continuing response because I can assure you, nobody can predict what will happen in July. And in July, nobody can predict what will happen in September, October. Will there be another spike? Will there be another healthcare emergency of the kind that we saw in March? So the government's response, Ranjit, to answer your question, number one, will not be episodic. It will be continuing. Number one. Number two, if you look at the 20 lakh crore package, you have to see this package in the context of a sequence of actions that the government did. The government's first responsibility was what I call soft landing, not to damage any piece of the real economy. It did that in March. It said moratorium. It said, I will contribute to Provident Fund. I will create liquidity in businesses. I will make sure that individuals or enterprise are not impacted from a liquidity emergency by making sure that liquidity is preserved in companies. Then it unveiled the second phase of soft landing for the poor, the vulnerable, the Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Yojana, the food program, increased MGNREGA. And it is ironical, and I want to point this out to all of you, that in historical India, whenever a crisis like this hit India, the main sufferers would have been rural India. Almost always the history of India tells you whenever there is a pandemic, whenever there is disease, whenever there is an emergency of this kind, rural India would take the brunt of the pain. It is exactly the opposite this time around. Rural India to a large extent has been economically, livelihood, food preserved. What has happened is urban India, which has taken the brunt of the disease, has the healthcare challenges, and the Shramik workers and the guest workers who are part of urban India, who lack a sufficient social security system, they've taken the brunt of the pain. Now come to the 20 lakh crore package. The 20 lakh crore package is designed to be a first step. I'm not the government, so don't quote me on this and get me into trouble, but I don't believe the 20 lakh crore package is the end of the government response. I think it is the beginning of the government response. It has addressed the MSMEs. It has addressed the absolutely most vulnerable part of our enterprise ecosystem, which is the MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium, and given them a government guaranteed loan framework of 3 lakh crores of loans, which effectively addresses 15 lakh crores of total outstanding of the debt, then subordinate debt and fund of funds, that is equity. So the MSMEs, in my opinion, will come out of this fairly well preserved, fairly competitive, fairly intact to begin the process of revival. Now the question that people ask is, but the 20 lakh crore does not address demand. So the answer to that question is very, very simple. We are just coming out of lockdown. We have to see what is the organic growth of demand that is coming from rural demand, and we have to see what the composite nature of the urban demand is. And if there is a necessity, sometime down the road, that government has to intervene with a fiscal package to bootstrap demand in certain sectors, I am pretty confident that the government will do so. But we must also accept and understand that demand growth will not be uniform across all sectors. For example, airline demand growth will never go back to pre-COVID-19 levels in the next 1 year. It is impossible that airlines will go back to those levels. Hospitality will never go back to pre-COVID-19 levels. It's impossible. Discretionary spending, buying your new fancy car, buying expensive gifts, disposable income related discretionary products will not go back to COVID-19 levels in the short term. Service industry like restaurants, etc., will not go back to COVID-19 levels, pre-COVID-19 levels in the short term. But food, FMCG, many other categories can go back to pre-COVID-19 levels and continue to grow. So we have to wait for about 30 days, 40 days to see what is the organic steady state or where demand lands up before we go back to the government and argue for a stimulus or not. And the stimulus in this case will be very simple, Ranjit, and to everybody. It will be a GST restructure. Because understand that in 2008, there was no GST. Now we have GST. So if all the state governments come together and the GST council decides, look, we are seeing FMCG growth take off, we are seeing some other growth take off, those categories we can reduce GST, make the demand go up, they'll take that decision. But it's important to take these decisions at the right time with the right amount of stimulus, because the government's capacity to support industry, support the economy has to be intact for the next 12 months. We cannot afford to exhaust our ammunition, to use a phrase, so quickly that when there is a real emergency and a real need, 12 to 18 months down the road, we are not able to do so. So I believe that is the background of the 20 lakh crore. But let me quickly touch on this Atmanirbhar Bharat for 2 minutes and then we can get back to our discussion. There is a lot of misgiving that Atmanirbhar Bharat is about self-sufficiency. It is not. That Atmanirbhar Bharat is about protectionism. It is not. That Atmanirbhar Bharat is in some ways inward looking. It is not. That Atmanirbhar Bharat is about the economy. It is not. Atmanirbhar Bharat is an acknowledgement and is a statement by the Prime Minister that the model, both social and economic, that we have practiced for the last many years needs rework. And it means that we want to go back to our basic model of India model, where villages, groups of villages, cities, states were all economically self-sufficient. Now you are all talking from Kerala, and I will use this example of Kerala. Ranjit knows this, that in the 2016 election when I campaigned in Kerala, I kept saying one thing, that the Kerala model is not sustainable. And the COVID-19 will prove that it is not sustainable for the following reasons. An economy that is so dependent on external remittances, external employment, and has very little domestic Atmanirbhar economic capacity will find itself in this new world very, very heavily impaired, very heavily disadvantaged. And that is exactly the model that we don't want in India, which is that we depend on foreign capital flows as the only way of monetizing and expanding our economy, because there is no domestic equity capacity. That we depend on ECBs and foreign borrowings because our domestic financial sector does not have capacity to fuel growth. There is Atmanirbhar Bharat is not anti-foreign. It is not about anti-foreign capital. It is not about anti-foreign investment or foreign businesses. It is about saying at the heart of our model, social and economic, there is a model that says that we can have the capabilities and capacities to produce and deliver services and products to not just our own markets, to the world at large. So Atmanirbhar Bharat is not autarky, it is not self-sufficiency, it is about self-reliance. And a self-reliance at a social community level of our villages and cities, and self-reliance at states, and self-reliance as a nation. So I think there is obviously, there will be people who will say, no, this is all very old-fashioned, this is all very, but it is not. It is a mix of the contemporary, forward-looking economic theory and our heritage and culture. Because this country has shown today that with 1.3 billion people facing up to coronavirus, you see the migrants today going back. What has held it together is not government action alone. It is NGOs. It is people and communities. You saw what the RSS has done in terms of the huge amount of support. In my own city of Bengaluru, NGOs came together through only private funding, raised 24 crores of rupees to fund food and travel expenses of migrants. So at the end of the day, this is Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is that inherent capacity of our people, our communities, whether they are at the village level, cluster of village level, cities, state level, has to be mobilized. And the government sits on top of that as an enabler to create world-class products, to deliver world-class services for not just India, but for the rest of the world. So I personally believe it is a very, very powerful call to action for the country, for change, to change our thinking, to expand our horizons, to think more than just simply following a Western economic model, simply following Western technology, simply following Western companies, and saying, no, we appreciate all that, but we will also now from today onwards embark on an Indian model of development. So I think Atmanirbhar Bharat in a summary is that. I just want to end with that, and I'm happy to join the discussion of that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rajeev, for that insightful explanation of what exactly is Atmanirbhar Bharat and how we should look at it on a very long-term perspective, and also telling us that this is episodic. The stimulus will come. The government will keep pushing it and supporting it and prodding the economy. And this is not a one-stop stimulus package kind of stuff. Yes. And it will be pro development and making Bharat a very, very strong economy with self-reliance as its motto. Thanks so much. And probably I'll now go to Sri Ganesh Kumar, who has wide and varied experience across the globe. He has been doing business in Africa and in Middle East and in India, Nepal, everywhere. So how would you, as an industry player, look at the package that has been rolled out by the government, and do you see that the Atmanirbhar Bharat will be achieved, and the industry's view on that, Ganeshji?
Good evening, and thank you, Ranjit. First of all, about Atmanirbhar Bharat, I'm not an authority to talk on that because you have got a lot of speakers who are authorities like Rajeev ji has already spoken. So I would like to speak more on export business, where I'm more involved, and also the packages which has been declared by the government of India. Now, when you start with the packages, as Rajeev ji also mentioned, there are something to survive during this lockdown period and after COVID India. So first, let me talk about after COVID India. Nothing has been declared today, but I expect that the government will take some action because this is the best opportunity for the Indians to end up across the globe, wherever the Chinese have a domination, because there will be some support from all these host countries where Chinese are already there, where we will get a better opportunity. But you have to also understand, I'm working in African countries. What I've seen, it's not that the products of India or the qualities of India which is making us behind Chinese. the funding which has been done by the Exim China, which makes them to grow in all those developing countries. Then the first thing we should focus that to get some good business, Exim India also should focus on these developing countries, where if we fund for those projects, which will definitely give business to the country. For example, if you fund for about $100 million of project to any African countries or a Latin American country or a Southeast Asian country, it is coming back by way of repayment of loan, and also the business is coming to India by which our people are getting employed, our engineering industry is growing, and in fact it is doubling. First, the products are purchased from India, the services are taken from India, and the loan is returned. This is the pattern by which Chinese have been growing in all these developing countries. Coming to the packages, what have been declared for my industry or where I am working, I expected something more than asking everybody to go and take loan and more loan facilities, because we are in a situation where we don't have much of margin to enhance our loan limits. Of course, it's giving some temporary relief, but that is not going to be a permanent relief when uncertainty is there, where you can't see what is your future. So I'm a little scared whether if I increase my liabilities, whether I'll be in a position to repay it. Regarding that packages given, something which could have attracted others, like the PF package. The PF package is given by the government for less than 100 employees and 15,000 salary up to 15,000. A company like mine, I don't have anybody who is drawing less than 15,000. So in fact, I am not getting benefited by any of them. There may be many such companies who are not getting any benefit out of this. So what way we will survive even during this COVID and after COVID, that itself, we don't know where we will be. I have about 4,000 employees working in 20 countries outside India. As soon as the international flight starts, I know all of them are going to come back. I don't know what will be the rules for taking them back by the government of India. So unless government supports the exporters, by which we can have more foreign exchange, which is the way of strengthening our economy, that is something I hope people like Rajeev ji can take up with the government and help us to improve our savings of foreign exchange by investing in the foreign countries and getting opportunities for companies like us to work in foreign countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Ganesh ji. Definitely, I'm sure that Rajeev will take it up and will talk to his good friend, Trade and Commerce Minister, and also the Finance Minister regarding the suggestions. We'll come back to that as to how to go about it soon. Now, I'll possibly like Sri Paul Thomas, who has made a mark in the last quarter of a century. In the not just a small finance bank, which is a recent venture, but he was in the microfinance domain. He has worked all across India, and he has been successful in lending and in the finance domain. As the Prime Minister has possibly reposed a lot of faith on the banking sector, and the non-banking financial institutions and the MFI. I'd like to hear from him his views on how the industry looks at it, whether they are geared up, because many a time when we have discussions in Laghu Udyog Bharati and Small Traders Association, we say that the bankers probably have a 3 lakh crore and they will put it possibly in the Reserve Bank of India and get the interest rather. They have a aversion to lend because of the impending the situation. So how would the bankers in general look at it, and your institution in particular look at this Atmanirbhar Bharat, or to make India Atmanirbhar? Over to you, Paul Thomas.
Thank you, Ranjit ji, for giving me this opportunity to interact with these eminent panels on this subject. And Rajeev ji, wish you a happy birthday, and I'm very glad that we are able to share the platform today with you. So Rajeev ji has already explained and explained about the impact of the COVID-19 in the economic front. I wanted to endorse his views. This is definitely, it's an era of uncertainty. Nobody has seen such a situation in the past years. We have faced many crises as a country. We have faced many crises, natural calamities, all. But compared to this, all those risks were very, very small. So the job losses, projected job losses is very high, almost 83 million job losses in the non-agriculture sector is what's projected, but the number nobody can predict also. Today's situation is that no prediction is going to be true. So we don't know what is going to come. So that is a situation where we give, where we live. Actually, and certain sectors which was mentioned by Rajeev ji, and the special impact on Kerala is the tourism sector. Around 38 million jobs in India, all over India, is going to be affected. But a good part is that being a bank, being an organization working in the rural side of mostly the rural part of India, almost 50% of or 55% of the economy was active. That is to the rural India was very, very active even during this lockdown period. So that is something gives us hope. And India still, when all the other major economies showing negative growth in April, we have grown 1.9%. We have grown. We have shown a positive growth. And among all the countries, only India and China is showing IMF has projected a positive growth, only 2 countries. So that is a hope for all of us. India still, because we have a strong domestic market, 1.3 billion people, that we have a very, very strong market. That is the advantage on that. And coming to the banking, every industry is affected, every sector is affected. So as bank is dependent on the overall economy. So when the overall economy is affected, the banks also get affected. So during the as an essential service during the lockdown period also, we were all the bank branches were working and providing the economic fuel. We were the economic fuel of this country. So coming to the packages, I would see that our Honorable Prime Minister's call for Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-reliance comes at the right time, when we are all realizing the difficulties with the foreign dependencies, or creating capabilities inside the country will provide a boost to our economy and to stabilize and grow. And for me personally, ESAF as a social enterprise, we have been focusing on, we have been advocating for self-reliant villages through various financial access to finance programs, financial literacy programs, financial education program, micro enterprise development programs, education and health program. So this concept of Atmanirbhar comes to me very close to, for me personally, to my heart. And our Honorable Prime Minister has taken many steps. This is a long term, not as I agree with Ganesh ji. This is most of the announcements done by our finance minister is on a long-term basis, long-term to build a self-reliant India. So the focuses, if you take look into that, we will come to know that. So as a banker working in the grassroots, I would say, our Honorable Prime Minister and the Government of India has taken these steps towards self-reliance from 2014 onwards. The programs like PMJDY, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, announced in 2014 for giving access to formal finance or opening of bank accounts, has helped people to government to do direct benefit transfer to very easily. This lockdown period also, this 500 rupee announced by the government for women PMJDY account holders could reach on the immediate third day, it has reached to their bank accounts. So then likewise, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the doubling of farmers' income by 2022, and Make in India projects and formation of 10,000 farmer producer organizations, all were started early. Actually, even before these COVID-19 pandemic, all these projects were started. But as Rajeev ji said, it was a sequence. It was started earlier, but all got affected by the COVID pandemic. So there is a criticism against bankers that bankers are not cooperating or not implementing the schemes introduced by the government, because most of these schemes announced by our finance minister to boost the economy should be implemented. It's all loan linked. Majority of it is loan linked schemes. So, but again, I would say the CGTMS or the loan guarantee scheme for MSMEs, where the loan limit was increased from 1 crore to 2 crore in the last budget. So they already, even before the COVID, steps were taken by the government. And the special, I would like to just touch upon some of the schemes announced by and how the banks view it. The MSME, the working capital support to existing MSME units, the 3 lakh crore support guarantee fund announced by the government. I hope banks have already started granting those loans because it is 100% guaranteed by the government. And for banks' interest also, unless they support the units, they will not be able to service their those loans even even after the moratorium or even after the COVID-19. So most of the banks are providing. For our case, in our case, we are dealing with the small borrowers. So even before the government finance minister announcing the scheme, we introduced a COVID care loan to help our borrowers to restart their business, to meet their emergency needs. We started an emergency loan. So it is definitely banks will implement these schemes, and Government of India the Ministry of Finance is closely monitoring the progress of these disbursements. So I'm sure bankers are also, because it's 100% guaranteed. And the major one change by the government on the MSME definition, it's a very important and long-lasting change, I would say. It will have a very positive impact on the MSME sector and on the economy, because MSME, as you all know, it contributes 30 to 35% of our GDP, employs more than 12 crore people in our country. So it is very, very, very important sector for us. So the change in definition, because there was earlier manufacturing and service sector were treated separately, and specifically in Kerala's context, I would say majority of the MSME industries sector were in service sector. So so the growth mainly where the people MSME owners wanted to keep a low profile to remain as in the MSME category itself. So So now the limits are extended. So people will take it as a on a growth phase. And another 50,000 crore equity support also will definitely improve the capital base of these MSMEs, so that banks will be able to lend more. Again, the capital flow, the fund flow to this sector will definitely improve. Bank funding to this sector will definitely improve. When it comes to farmers, as I said earlier, rural is very, very important. The two regulatory changes or legal changes going to be introduced by the government. So on the Essential Commodities Act and the deregulation of agri markets is going to be a long-lasting impact on the rural sector and the farm sector, definitely. Now the farmers will get the freedom. So definitely Kerala farmers will not, APMC Act is not implemented in Kerala. So Kerala farmers have not experienced that difficulties. So, but major agri states have faced those farmers have faced those challenges. So these regulatory changes, if you ask, maybe government use this crisis situation so that immediately the government will be able to implement it. So otherwise it has been there for discussion for a long time. And this 10,000 crore support for formalization of another sector, which is I'm very closely associated, is the formalization of micro food enterprises. 10,000 crore support provided definitely is going to change specifically the women self-help. It will support the women self-help groups, the traditional ethnic food manufacturers in our country will definitely help, and banks will definitely, and we have been supporting as a bank, as a small finance bank, we have been working in those sectors. So I agree with Rajeev ji. This is not a short-term program. This is on a Atmanirbhar Bharat is a very long-term approach to improve our own Indian economy. Definitely, we are not against foreign funding or foreign investments. So we will take foreign investments, but generally we will be able to produce here to support here. And Indian banks, as a small finance bank, I can definitely vouch for it. We are supporting the grassroots economy, the real economy. We are all working with. But unfortunately, I hope Rajeev ji will take it with the government. Actually, we as a ESAF Small Finance Bank have opened 34 lakh Jan-Dhan women accounts. But our bank account holders were not considered by the Finance Ministry for transferring the 500 rupee per month direct transfer to the women accounts. We have already taken it about the DFS. So and a few other areas, I think I will share that in the next phase of the part of the discussion. I will share those concerns and the support required from the government for banks. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Thomasly. I would now like to bring the most important person who has been very vocal about local all through. And now that the government has started talking the language that Swadeshi, Jagaran, Manch has been talking since its inception in the 90s. Sundaram ji, we have never been Videshi Samharan Manch, so to speak. So we have never been against the Videshi, but we have to protect our industry now that we have seen that the global leaders have started talking about that. And you have now heard Rajeev ji explaining the Atmanirbhar Bharat as the corporate, and lawmakers should define it, the industrialists as well as the bankers, the three very important players. And how would you look at it in the Swadeshi perspective? Sundaram ji.
Good evening, Ranjit. In fact, I am very happy to be in the midst of Kerala, God's own country, a state I very much always like. At the outset, I share my greetings to Rajeev Chandrasekhar on his birthday and wishing him many more happy returns of the day. And as indicated by you, the words vocal for local economy local supply chain, Atmanirbhar Bharat, decentralization, rural economy. These are all music to my ears. And when I hear it from the mouth of the Prime Minister, it's no doubt I am really elated. For me, I don't consider protectionism as a bad word, because the world history is full of examples. Every country, when during its developmental stage, they followed only protectionism. You take the case of United States of America. I can give you the 30-year statistics of American States of America. Time is not there, but I can definitely share it with you. You take the case of China, or you take the case of any other country which has grown. China entered the WTO only after stabilizing itself, whereas India entered the WTO in 1995 itself. So for me, protectionism is not that much a bad word. The world experimented with violent and aggressive globalization from 1980s to 2012-13, I can say. The global flow of capital, which was $2 trillion during 80s, went up to $15 trillion by either 2010, and it has come back to $2.2 trillion, the same level as it was during 80s. The world trade, it used to grow at 5%, and the world GDP used to grow at 2.5%. It means that the individual countries' growth, international trade was contributing to the growth of the global GDP. But today, the international GDP is growing at 2.5%. The international trade is going at 2.5%. It means that every country has started looking after its own affairs, and scope for international trade is limited. Ranjit, apart from length, width, and breadth, there is a time factor. China became the factory of the world from 1980 to 2010. Today, every country has developed its own manufacturing capacity to the extent possible. And if you are going to look for external opportunities now, I think you will be chasing the wrong things. So as I told, Swadeshi Jagaran was never against anything, but we are for protecting ourselves. The way in which the China has conducted the business affairs, let's say less said, better. In my management classes, I always used to say one quotation as far as international trade is concerned. In India, you have two models. One is Rama and other is Krishna. For Rama, means are as important as the end. He will not deviate from the path of Dharma. But the other man is a manipulator. For him to destroy enemy, means are not that much important as the end. So I submit before the panel and other audience here today that be a Krishna when you are dealing with an international customer, and don't be a Rama. It's a win. You have to win the game. So here, whether you call it protectionism or you call it a closed economy, I'm not worried about all these things. I want the interest of my country to be protected, and I am willing to travel any extent to achieve this. I'll give you only one example, and then I'll share 2-3 things at close. There was a nuclear conference during the year 2004, which was to be conducted by the United States of America. M.S. Srinivasan was one of the invitees. The American government has decided that he should not be allowed to participate in that conference. So 2 days before the conference, a notification was given to M.S. Srinivasan that there is a full stop between M and S, which is not tallying with your passport. The corrections were done. After 2 days, the American government duly apologized. Sir, we have found nothing wrong in your passport. It is all right. Please excuse it. By the time the conference was over. So this is the way in which the international trade and commerce is conducted. And if you are going to preach Dharma to these people, I think you are subjecting the entire fate of a nation to some miscreants. So now, after COVID, the West is there is going to be a paradigm change in the economic thinking of the West. The West is going to abandon what it has preached to the world during the last 40 years. Domestic production, and domestic employment is going to be the mantra for at least for the next 10 years. There is going to be a massive disruption to global supply chain, and a part of it will move to India. Whether it's conspiracy or no conspiracy, now there is anti-Chinese mood prevailing throughout the world, and I suggest that India should align with the like-minded countries and grab a substantial share of the market enjoyed by China. So I'm repeatedly saying that this is business, this is war, and when you are getting an opportunity, you have to strike. So this is the path I suggest by people like Rajeev, Chandrasekhar are here. This is what Swadeshi government has been advising the government. And finally, the world is going to move away from chemical-based industrialized farming. The French president has already declared that by 2024, France will be rid of industrial farming altogether. France will adopt only natural farming. Here also now the RSHC has given a call for organic and natural farming. It will maintain the fertility of the land. Less water will be consumed. Cattle can be taken care of well. So all these things are there. So the world is moving towards a completely different dimension than what we are witnessing so far. So taking all these things into account, I welcome the statement. I read it in my own way because I may differ with the paradigm of Chandrasekhar, but I am reading it that Modi ji has given a call for Swadeshi. Modi ji has given a call for the development of our own development of economics, and we should also call for a decentralized development model. Before closing, I wish to share only one thing. India is called a demographically rich country, meaning that about 70% of our population is of productive age, and roughly around 90 crores. So Swadeshi government says that all these productive population must be utilized if you want to grow. Again, the world is full of history. When they had this demographic advantage, every country has grown. Maybe United States in 50s, Japan in 70s, Southeast Asian countries during 80s, and China from 1990 to 2015. So today we have a very strange situation. We have a demographic advantage which is likely to last for the next 20 years, 2040, and our attempt should be to make use of our human resources to the largest extent possible. So we advocate an employment-centric development model rather than a GDP-centric development model. So with these observations, I close, and I heartfully thank the Prime Minister for giving a right call at the right time. And finally, had Swadeshi government would have been happy if the government comes out with the fiscal package and gone to the rescue of some of the people who are most affected. Anyway, Rajeev has stated that it's not the end of the world, but the quicker it comes, it will be better. We will also be monitoring the entire affair, and Swadeshi government will never fail to raise the issue of the people as and when the time comes. So Swadeshi as an idea whose time has come, and we are discussing it in the right moment. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. And taking it from what you left off, the demographic dividend, Rajeev. If I understand, we have a very, very big demographic dividend to be reaped. However, there is a lot of talk about the NEET category. That is the not in education, employment, or training. We have a huge population, maybe at the Hindi heartland, but we have not been able to skill them well for the last maybe 20 years. We have not focused it well. Maybe this government, since 2014, there has been a very serious thrust on that. But have we reached there, and what are the efforts, and especially from the point of view of technology? Because now everybody, the farmers are enabled. Everybody thought that technology will not reach the rural masses, but it has now. And how do you think that we can possibly tackle this NEET category where they are not at all productive? Because we are inviting a lot of foreign investors to set up their factories in India, and we have a serious handicap here, don't we? Yes, Rajeev.
No, Ranjit. I think we have to accept one very fundamental point, that we are at a point in our history today. And Ranjit, before I answer you, I just want to talk about what Mr. Ganesh raised about export problems. I just want to give him comfort that the issue that you raise about, for example, companies that are having employees more than 15,000 not getting the benefit of the Provident Fund liquidity scheme that the government has announced is an issue that has been raised already with the finance minister and the prime minister. So they are looking at other ways to address companies such as yours and other companies on the issue of how to get more liquidity in your hands. So I would wait in the month of June for some announcements, is my understanding. But you have my email, and please feel free to reach out to me if there's any specific suggestion you want me to take up with the finance minister. So that's point number one. Point number two, Ranjit, going back to your point, you see the basic architecture of our economy has been something that Prime Minister Modi sort of inherited in 2014. And he inherited that economy in a mess. So he has spent 4 or 5 years in basically just building back the financial sector, building back trust in government, building back policy making in the last 4 to 5 years. And as Mr. Paul Thomas said, a number of the decisions taken in the first term have helped us in this fight against coronavirus, whether it is JDY, whether it is our ability today increasingly to work without losing too much productivity through Zoom and other platforms, has been because he did Digital India. So there are many things that have happened that have helped us today. But one thing is clear, that the one thing he was not able to do in the first term, and that is the focus now with Atmanirbhar Bharat, is to re-architect the economic roadmap for the country. Now, the reason skilling in India has not really succeeded is that the money spent on skilling was trying to fill in the blanks of the economy that existed as is. And as we are transitioning to a new model where there will be much more manufacturing, much more precision manufacturing, much more higher quality manufacturing, the skill sets that we need in our youth in UP, youth in Bihar, youth in Chhattisgarh, youth in Jharkhand are significantly more than just saying, how do you connect 2 taps? How do you do plumbing? So I think a lot of this emerges from a clarity in our economic direction, the clarity in the economic architecture, which the Prime Minister is now bringing forth. And I suspect that will drive the way we skill our people. Second point, I just want to make this very, very important point, which is that I'm an entrepreneur before I became a politician, and many of people here are involved in business. One of the biggest problems that anybody in business, whether he's a farmer who's also a businessman, or a medium businessman or a micro enterprise, has is that the system, and the system I mean the governance, the rules, the compliance, the laws, the inspectors, the politicians, the corporators, the MLAs, all of that superstructure is very antagonistic and hostile towards business. They make it difficult for a businessman, whether he's a farmer producing vegetables or growing paddy and wheat, or a small businessman making some manufactured product. This system makes it very difficult, very expensive, and very, very complicated to operate in India. And the biggest reform that needs to come is about enabling those who are contributing to the economy to allow them to contribute, make it easier for them to contribute, and make it easier for them to grow. So already you are seeing some signs of that from the Prime Minister. When he says, I'm going to reform agriculture, he is not talking about doubling the income by increasing MSP. He is looking at the supply side and the other issues that govern farmers' economic model. Moving out middlemen, giving him the ability to transact directly, reforming APMC. These are all elements of what I believe Atmanirbhar Bharat will represent, which is enterprise, which is what Swadeshi Jagaran Manch has said for many, many years. Enterprise is the cornerstone of our economy. Individual enterprise, micro enterprise, village enterprise, whatever, self-help group enterprise. Governments, state, center, village, district must get out of the way of enterprise. Financial sectors must enable enterprise rather than put the brakes on enterprise. I think that the crux of the Atmanirbhar Bharat reforms will be around this. Allowing somebody with the aspiration, the age, the demography, and the energy who wants to succeed they should be able to succeed, rather than have to deal with, and I'll give you one example before I shut up, which is that a big Taiwanese contract manufacturing company told me recently during this COVID virus that we will never set up a unit in India exceeding 1,000 employees anywhere, in any one state, any one district. Maximum we will do 4,000 in one state. I asked him why. He said, and this is a Taiwanese company, saying, we don't want the headache of dealing with the local MLA coming in one day. We don't want the headache of dealing with labor union leaders or political parties affiliated to labor union leaders. We don't have a problem with labor unions. But the harassment and the cost and the difficulty of dealing with this so-called superstructure in the name of enforcing a law is just too expensive for us in terms of time, effort, and motivation. So we would rather go put the investment in Philippines. We would rather go put the investment in Vietnam. We would rather go put the investment in Laos and Cambodia. So that is the crux of where we must focus. It is not just about FDI limits and saying, we'll have 100% FDI here and 50% FDI there and all that. That, I think that game is over. Now we have to do structural changes, including, like you correctly said, skilling. I can't hear you. Mute.
Sorry. Thanks, Rajeev. I'd go to Ganesh on the matter of the trade union problems that, or rather the politicians' involvement with the industrialists, where the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh has recently started talking about the Udyog Parivar. And would you possibly look at this concept as an Udyog Parivar, where taking out the labor from the factor of production, rather than looking at them as a mere input or a factor that would possibly create something, a sheer capitalistic view? How would you like to have? What is your experience in other countries? Especially in Africa, where you have worked extensively. How would you go about doing it and suggest ways and means to India?
Yeah. I have to answer in two parts. First of all, we have to talk about India, because I put up projects in almost all states of India, except the state from where I am. That doesn't mean that the state where from I am has got more unions or anything. Of course, there are a lot of trade unions in Kerala. I've never done a project in Kerala, but other part of India has got more than trade unions. The local village sarpanch and local politicians, they get involved for everything. As Rajeev has mentioned, any foreign investor who comes here, they are really facing all the problems from the local MLAs, local sarpanch, local village pradhans. There's no end to it, especially on the northeastern part, then on the central part of India. Now, one of these reasons what I have seen, when you have seen this lockdown, you could see a lot of migrant labor going back from southern states of India. Those are unskilled labor who have been returning from southern part of India to central India or northern India, especially the states of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa. These are the states blessed with odd minerals. The problem is there is not much of skill development in all these states. So the salary structure in those states, in comparison to the southern states, a southern state and unskilled labor get much more than what a skilled labor gets in the so-called Hindi belt of India. This makes a very big transmission of labor traveling all the way from there, because without studying anything, without getting any skill development, they can earn better when they come to southern part of India, work in a hotel or a restaurant as a cleaner or a boy serving or cleaning. They get paid about 900 to 1,000 rupees a day, whereas the skilled people in Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand or any of these parts are being paid at the rate of 500 to 600 rupees a day. So the first thing what you have to attend is developing skill in these areas will make unskilled people to get developed in their own state, so that you will not find much of migration of labor, any such pandemics or epidemics coming in any part of India. The biggest problem today, every state, especially on the southern part, is facing how to send back this migrant labor. Now, coming to the African countries where I am more prominent, I am working in about 27 African countries. There also you have these local issues. We are taking these local people. We keep a target. When I started in 2002, we had a ratio of about 60% or 70% of people going from India, employing about 30% people locally. But we have shown to them this 30% are trained, by which when we come back after setting up a factory, those 30% out of 30%, 15 to 20% gets developed and they get a permanent employment. They welcome this idea that we are giving an opportunity to train them and develop skill development in these countries. The government of all these countries are participating in these discussions to inform the local people that these people have come to put up a factory here, they'll train you, so you will get permanent employment. This sort of a feel, if it is given to the people on Jharkhand or Orissa or Chhattisgarh or Bihar, it's high time that this type of a development has to be made on the minds of those people. They will feel that my state is going to be developed, I'll get a permanent employment. Instead of traveling all the way to down south, even to the state of Kerala or Tamil Nadu to work as a hotel servant or a cleaner in any municipal or drainage cleaning or anything, which years back, every state had their own people. Today, everybody is depending on this migrant labor. So this is one which I feel that the government should focus on these states, where especially if you see that the states are ruled by the same government who are ruling the central also. So it's very, very easy to perform there. When you come to the African countries, when you develop these people, I can see a lot of government being appreciating the efforts taken by the Indian companies to develop. If you see the Eastern Africa, especially the East African Union, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi, the top businessmen today, they're all farmers from India who must have gone as a cane cutter or a railway employee some 2-3 decades back. They're the next generation are the people who are running the business there. They never entered into politics or anything. They remain as businessmen. They're continuing as businessmen. The local people are giving all sort of supports because they have been getting proper employment from these people. The country is developing. So they welcome Indians. And this is the high time that we lost a war in '62 with Chinese. Probably God must have given a chance to us to beat Chinese by economical war without a single missile or a gun being used. Thank you.
Thanks. Sri Paul Thomas, you have been very, very vocal about the self-help groups, and you have been very active in those roles across India, not just in Kerala. So how would you think, because we have been talking right from in the year 2020, people like Ruchir Sharma has predicted that small is going to be beautiful again. It is going to be distributed production, and it's something which will be the neighborhood corner store, which will be helping you rather than the malls and the big format. Even the cinema halls, people are, because of the social distancing norms, people getting scared about contracting the novel coronavirus. So how would you think that the fund of funds or the microfinance funds that are being offered by the government could be put to good use? And do you have any particular suggestions to the government, where Rajeev himself is an investor in many areas? He understands the domain very well. And what is your suggestions to the government for effectively utilizing it to the distributed production, across the villages, and making Atmanirbhar Bharat go right down to the common man, the people at the bottom of the pyramid?
Yeah, thank you, Ranjit ji. So I just wanted to, I think if you really wanted to achieve the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan successful, we need to, as Sundaram ji earlier said, we need to take the decentralization should happen. Now, the migrant workers from Mumbai, Delhi, and all major cities have gone back to Orissa, Bengal, and Jharkhand, those states. So some of them will definitely will come back, and some of them wanted to be there. So we need to develop as Ganesh earlier said, one thing is that we should focus on skilling of these people. That is, and they also bring some skills to the villages. There are people who have been working in urban large companies, so they are already trained. So they can be used as trainers and train the people in the villages. But a hub and spoke model type of production or a decentralized production units setup has to happen in India, because I totally our Prime Minister also have indicated in his speech that, and this is going to be achieved. Atmanirbhar Bharat is going to be achieved through entrepreneurship. So government, political parties, trade unions, the larger society have to accept the fact that enterprises, businessmen, entrepreneurs create jobs, create wealth. So unfortunately, specifically in our state, the entrepreneurs are not being honored or respected, or nobody take the contribution. For example, say in ESAF, we have created 7,000 direct jobs. So with all benefits we are providing. So in so many things such that. So many people like that. So, but instead of creating hurdles, if we encourage entrepreneurs, definitely with the government support, we will be able to do that. And talking about rural self-help group and all. See, self-help groups, women, the farmer producer companies. We have been, ESAF has been working in the area of promoting farmer producer companies since 2006. So we have promoted 72 farmer producer companies. So government has established a street vendors loan, mudra loan, interest subvention. All these schemes were announced. But the small finance banks, which I am representing, in 2014, after the government under Modi ji introduced the differentiated banks in India, and small finance banks were licensed in 2015, and 10 banks were started in 2017, 16 and 17. 10 small finance banks were started. The advantage of these small finance banks are they are dealing with their experience, or they are focused, or they are licensed to deal with small entrepreneurs, because it's a licensing condition that 50% of our loan should be below 25 lakhs, and we are 75% of our assets should be on priority sector. And so we have the last mile connectivity. We have branches across the rural side, but unfortunately, the Ministry of Finance and Government of India are not using this channel effectively. That's I request Rajeev ji I can write to Rajeev ji separately also about it. So especially maybe for doing the DBT transfer and providing these MSME loans. So there is an issue, because banks, they consider together along with all PSU banks, they are considered as a small finance banks also, and set a interest rate cap is there. It's 9.25%. For non-bank companies, it is 14%. So small finance banks are new entities. Our cost of fund is higher side. So our cost of fund itself comes to 9.2%. So we cannot give a loan at 9.25%. So if you really wanted to use this guarantee scheme, we have to give it this under this interest rate cap. And we are not included under the interest subvention scheme for agriculture. So if consider along with the other banks, we will be able to reach out to large number of self-help groups in this country, and also small microfinance institutions are also playing an important role. So we understand this segment very much. we will be able to, instead of pushing larger banks to this sector, supporting the smaller banks, having a focus on rural and micro entrepreneurs will be helpful. So that is my thought on that.
Thank you, Paul. We have another 10 minutes of time, and we would definitely like to hear from Sundaram ji how he would like to see the mission taken forward in the Swadeshi perspective, and probably after that we will have one comment from Rajeev, and then we will take one or two quick questions, and we will wind up at 7:30 sharp.
Ranjit, I have learnt a lot from Thomas, because I want to assure him that Swadeshi government will definitely take up the cause of small. We are with you, and we are for last mile connectivity. We very much appreciate the services rendered by people like you. So you form the core of my constituency. So definitely the SJM will take up your issue and try to sort it out. So this is my first observation. Second thing is, small is going to be beautiful. Again, Ranjit, thank you for having brought in my notice. I am for tech-enabled small business. Listen to me very carefully about 2-3 observations I am making. If you study the market cap of Facebook, Amazon, and Apple together, it is $3.3 trillion, more than the GDP of India. And you see the model adopted by Uber, the power of capital. If you are to be a Uber man, you have to bring your own car, you have to maintain it, they will not pay you any salary, you have to pay your EMI, and finally they will give you some business. From that also they will take away something. See, the capital is forcing the labor to fund its own business. This is a very, very troubling situation for me. So I want to have a tech-enabled small business where I want to give technology to these small people. If I am successful in creating around 5 crore small tech-enabled business who can do business on their own using technology, employing about 2-3 people each, I will be creating 15 crore employment rather than depending on somebody like Uber. So I think my future is going to be tech-enabled small business. So the fundamental object for which the Swadeshi government will work in the next 2-3 years is a decentralized model. Our focus will be on generating employment, and we want to infuse technology in the small business so they become competitive. So these are all the foundations on which the Swadeshi government will work. Finally, before concluding, there must be your the government may liberalize FDI or something like that. The things you do must be in tandem with your objective. If your object is employment generation, and if you bring in FDI will always come with new technology and employment, which will be the immediate casualty. So trying to bring FDI and then improving employment situation, I think I don't see it is good. It's not going together. In India, most of the employment is FDI is coming in brownfield sector rather than in greenfield sector. So employ FDI in greenfield sector with new technology and employment generation, we don't have any objection. Otherwise, we want to protect the employment of our own people. So the government's focus for the next 3-4 years will be employment generation, decentralized development model, and infusion of technology.
Thank you, Sundaramji. Probably, that must be music to Rajeev's ears. Technology is what it is. And before we give you the opportunity to have a concluding remarks, Rajeev, I would like anybody present here to raise 1 or 2 quick questions, not very long. Rajeev has to go also. So if anybody would like to talk, raise a question to Rajeev, we can do it now. Arun, would you like to make a shot at it?
No.
So in that case, Rajeev, Okay.
Yeah.
In that case, Rajeev, how would you, as a disruptor in the telecom sector, somebody who actually had brought in shown the guts to, take the leadership in the cellular technology, how would you think that the small is beautiful remark is going to be made dream come true in the Atmanirbhar Bharat with the support of technology? How would you look at that, and would you have any specific plans to probably support the distributed technology domains across India? Rajeev, please unmute and talk.
Just so that, just a quick point on Mr. Paul Thomas. I think I agree with you that in the current scheme of things, the finance ministry has not too clearly thought through the role of the small finance bank in transmission of credit. It is quite clear that that hasn't been thought through at all. And if you have any ideas on that, please email that to me, and I will make sure that the small finance bank is integrated into the overall framework of what the finance minister is thinking about transmitting credit. Because the entire issue today, as the Prime Minister said in his May 14th speech, is amongst the 4 L's. One of the L's is liquidity. And liquidity has to be transmitted. Currently, we depend a lot on public sector banks. The private sector banks are not a good way to distribute liquidity, but the small finance banks, clearly, I think there is an opportunity there if we explain this to the bureaucrats in Delhi. Look, on the issue of small, I think we must understand, while Atmanirbhar Bharat, my own view of small, big, medium is like this. I'm very agnostic towards small, medium, big. In today's world, it does not matter if you're big or small, as long as you're competitive and you have some compelling product or service that you're offering. And there is a compelling product or service market that wants your product and service. It cannot be anybody's case. The government has to backstop a business throughout its life. Yes, bootstrapping a business, enabling a business, that is fine. But the moment you create models that depend extensively and for a longer period on government support, then you're getting into a hazy space of model hazard. I would say it differently. I would say small is also beautiful. I'm not saying small is to the exclusion of medium or small is to the exclusion of large. Currently, the economic models are, if you are large, if you have access to capital, you have an automatic, in a sense, advantage in accessing capital. The large become larger and the small fade away. I think Atmanirbhar Bharat will allow the small to continue to be small, grow to medium, and have its own space, have its own access to capital, have its own enabling ecosystem of competitiveness, and everybody does not have to become very big to survive. So I would leave it at that. As far as technology is concerned, Ranjit, I will just say this. Whether we like it or not, technology is going to disrupt business models, already disrupting business models, is disrupting consumer behavior in ways that we can not even begin to anticipate today. In the next 2-3 years, after the coronavirus, consumer behavior is going to change so dramatically. And social distancing, as long as the vaccine and the medicine is not available on the horizon, is going to so sharply change consumption patterns. The entire retail service sector, all of that is going to be re-architected on the back of technology. So, very difficult to predict what technology will be 2 years from now, what will be the nature of business that is sitting on a technology platform. But it's a safe assumption to make today that technology will alter the competitiveness, the longevity, the viability, and sustenance of business, small or big, in coming years. And that is just a matter of fact. I won't say anything more. I think we are at a very, very critical stage in our history as a nation. What we are going to do has never been done in the last 75 years. The challenges we face have never come before 75 years. And the opportunities that we have as a nation have never come to us before. This whole opportunity of China degrading and the China story melting down has never come to us in the last 75 years. So I think it is a question of the Prime Minister calling every Indian to action with this Atmanirbhar Bharat call, and hopefully all of us responding.
Thank you, Rajeev. And I let you go. Thanks from our radio partner, Radio Natal, and our television partner, Tattvamayi TV, also, who has been broadcasting and webcasting it live. And thank you so much for being here and spending time on your birthday. And wish you a very long and happy life. Thank you so very much. We'll connect soon.
Thank you,
Thanks, Rajeev.
Thank you for having me this evening. Thank you very much.
If we can have a few more minutes with other panelists, maybe a quick question to Paul Thomas from perspective of bankers playing. There's a question from a viewer when it comes to pushing down the benefits to the ground zero or to the bottom of the pyramid. Banks always play the Tom and Jerry. They face the same fate M.S. Srinivasan faced, as Sundaramji was mentioning. What they shall be aware to get these benefits, what is it that they lack which banks expect, and how can we educate the small entrepreneurs about it? So that's a question. Probably Paul Thomas, you can answer that. That'd be nice. We'll take another few minutes. I thought this was a very interesting question, so I couldn't resist.
I would say that anyway, we have been working as a banker. We only become a bank for last 3 years only. So we have been working in this space as a microfinance entity for many years. So we have been working with the bottom of the pyramid. So we understand that segment. I'm not saying that all the banks may be like that. But small finance bank, I can definitely say that we have been creating awareness about all these schemes among our customer segments. And and I also consider other banks also, because it is these 3 lakh crore government is providing us working capital support guarantee. Since it is 100% guaranteed by the government, there is no banks don't have to relate for granting that, because there are issues with the banks also. Banks have been facing almost 10% is the NPA in September 19, and everybody is worried about, because a lot of uncertainty is there in the market. So, but since there is guarantee provided, 100% guarantee provided by the bank for MSMEs, definitely banks will be open to give these loans based on their association with the bank and their outstanding credit as on February 29. That is the direction government has given. So, and we already started. We have 35 lakh low income families as our customers. We started even 2 weeks ago. We started for our existing customers. We started branding loans, and that will be the case with other banks also. That's my say on that.
Thank you, Paul Thomas ji. And if panelists want to make a comment, Ganesh ji, one quick parting comment that you want to make. Please unmute and talk, please.
It was a nice session, very nicely organized by you. I'm taking this opportunity to thank you for inviting me to participate in this.
Oh, that's very kind words for me, but the credit goes to Arun Lakshman. he was the man behind, and I stole the show. Anyway, thanks, Ganesh ji. So I think Sundaram ji, if you want to have a very quick remark.
It's a very excellent program. I fully enjoyed that. My only thing is this development should become a Jan Andolan, as society should take it up. So I conclude by repeating the words of Tengri in his last part of his life. He said that disproportionate influence of politics on society should come down. So with this message, I congratulate all of you for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. You know, that was a
Ranjit,
very,
1 minute. Ranjit, 1 minute.
please go ahead.
You didn't stole the show. No, you are comparing. No problem.
Thank you for reminding me that, Arun. Thanks so much. It has been a very engaging session. You know, we had an erudite team, very knowledgeable people. I think we will have more such sessions. Thank you so very much for Radio Netal and Tatomai TV for carrying it live, to Crowd Project, the team who supported us technically. Thank you very much for all of you who have come here, and let us all be part of this Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. See, it takes two to tango. When we all say that, you know, the government has to help us, support us, we should also understand that we are the government. So that part also. Thank you very much.
Thank
Jai
you,
Hind.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you all. Thank you.
Hello.